Welcome to the Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs podcast, a place for podcasters to learn what's actually working in the world of podcasting and how to use their podcast to generate consistent leads in their business. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm so excited you're here.
Hey Savvies, in today's episode, I am chatting about what to do when you're not happy with an interview. Because let's be real, if you record interviews with guests on a regular basis, you will probably eventually run into this at some point. So it's good to be prepared beforehand. So the unhappiness with an interview may be due just to bad audio quality, not so great content, or something else, but preparation is key so that you're not stumped in the future if this happens to you. So let's jump into the solutions that you can take in the event that this does happen. So, number one, you can ask the person to re record with you. If the reason you're unhappy with the interview is due to crappy audio quality that isn't salvageable in the editing process and not due to the content itself, don't be afraid to ask the guest to re record. They likely want to be seen in the most professional light possible, so I'm sure they'd rather have an interview with great quality audio published than one that is almost inaudible. If you like the guest, you think they have really great content to provide, but it was just an issue of audio quality, ask them to re-record. And before doing so, make sure that you guys both have good internet, you both have the proper equipment, and everything will run a lot more smoothly once you're prepared in that instance. Okay, so number two, you can totally scrap the interview. So, whether the guest just didn't live up to your expectations or another reason, it is okay to just completely get rid of the interview. I've done this before, and that's completely your right as a podcaster if you don't love how the content turns out, because you want to publish high quality content and not just put out an episode for the sake of it. So, if this happens to you, don't feel guilty. You want to continue to promote content that is going to be helpful for your audience, and just posting an episode just to post an episode is not going to do anyone any good. So whether you reach out to the guest and let them know that you won't be publishing the episode or not, it's completely up to you. Use your best judgment here. When I did it, I will say I didn't reach out and let them know, but if you want to do that, you can do it. If you don't want to, totally fine too. Up to you. And before we dive into the third and final solution, I did want to pause this episode for a second to chat about my 5 mistakes you're probably making with your podcast guide. So, if you've been podcasting for a while, but you aren't seeing the results that you hoped for, then you need to download this guide and start making these 5 changes today. So you can do that by heading to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/guide, and you can grab that guide today. All right, let's get back into solution number 3. So the third solution is to post it anyway. I know I did this previously with an interview that I didn't feel like was my best or that person's best, and it ended up being one of my episodes that was actually on the higher side for downloads, which I found really interesting. So this is an option as well. If it's just you're not super confident, but it's not completely terrible, you can do that. And to be fair, the interview that I had published wasn't terrible content wise. I just felt like the guest wasn't comfortable behind the mic. So some parts of the interview were like felt a little awkward, but it wasn't like awful content wise. That's why I ended up publishing. I would definitely not publish if I felt the content was crappy. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. So to recap the 3 different ways, you ask to re-record if you really enjoyed the guest, you think they have something really valuable to share with your audience. You totally just scrap the interview and say, nope, I'm good, move on. And number 3, you can post it anyway if it is good content and it's not completely terrible. It's just maybe a little awkward or something. Those are the 3 different options. And personally, I think when something like this happens, it gives you the opportunity to refine your processes, especially if the issue ends up being a not so great content from a guest. This really means that you may need to do a better job vetting your guests before inviting them to be on your show, do more research, have them fill out a form, check and see other podcasts that they've been on. That is always really helpful for me. I used to do pre-interview calls, but I don't have time for that anymore. So really just doing research before inviting people on is key, so I don't have to do those pre-interview calls, and I make sure that I have really awesome guests. And I really just think that every hang up like this is just a learning lesson for us so that we can do better in and continue to improve our show or in just improve in life in general. So if this happens to you in the future, don't fret. Just take it as a learning experience and use it to your advantage and use one of these 3 different solutions when it comes down to it. So, yeah, that is it for today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode by going to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher, and leave a review. You can find us at savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com and on Facebook at Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs and Instagram at Savvy Podcasting. Make sure to join our free Facebook community for podcasters by going to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/community and join in on the exclusive community just for Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs listeners. I'll see you there.